Super. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to see what your screen looks like to others. So thank you for your patience, everyone. I think we should get started. It's 6:02. Julia is on, and she'll let folks in as they join, if they're joining us a little late. But first, I wanted to introduce Vidya Sosa from Community Language Cooperative, and she's going to explain how our interpretation is going to work this evening. Vidya?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Vidya Sosa. I am here with the Community Language Cup, and we are here to help create a space for language justice. What that means is that we want to create a space where everyone can participate and engage in the language of their heart, or the language that they feel most comfortable in. We will use simultaneous interpretation to create this space. When I finish saying this in Spanish, we will turn on interpretation and you will see a globe icon that says interpretation. If you are not fully bilingual, we ask that you select your preferred language. If you are bilingual, feel free to listen to everyone in their language. When you select your language, you can check mute original audio so you don't hear both languages at the same time. Hola, mi nombre es Viria Sosa, estoy aquí con la Community Language Cup y estamos aquí para ayudar a crear un espacio donde practicamos la justicia del lenguaje. Lo que esto significa es que queremos crear un espacio donde todos puedan participar e involucrarse en el idioma de su corazón o en el idioma en el que se sientan más cómodos. Usaremos la interpretación simultánea para crear este espacio. Cuando termine de decir esto, activaremos la interpretación y verá un icono de globo que dice interpretación. Si no es completamente bilingüe, le pedimos que seleccione su idioma preferido. Si es bilingüe, puede escuchar a todos en su idioma. Cuando seleccione su idioma, puede hacer clic en silenciar el audio original para que no escuches ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo. Please select your language and I will check to make sure you can hear me. Can you? Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vidya. Okay, so great. I hope that everyone that needed that got that information. If you're having any technical questions about that, please feel free to type them in the chat and we'll try to help you. So welcome to our virtual public meeting on the N Zuni Street Bikeway. My name is Chris Vogelsang, and I'm the consultant project manager for the planning studies going on in the area, and I'll be sort of leading with Geneva Hooten tonight. So for every public meeting, we do this way. I know most of us have been through this many times, but a couple orientation things. Make sure it really helps us if your camera and microphone are off, if you've muted, so that we don't get background noise that's distracting. The chat button in the bottom is very important. So if you have questions or comments or things as we're going along, feel free to type them in there and we'll try to integrate those into our discussion. We are going to have breakout rooms tonight to have really in-depth discussion by voice in person. So the chat is not your only method of giving us your input. After the meeting, feel free to go to bit.ly Denver Bike Paving or email us at bikes@denvergov.org to give us more feedback. Quick overview of our meeting this evening. So first we want to give you a project overview that includes the kind of program information, the feedback we've gotten to date about the concept designs. Some nearby projects and give you an overview of the concept designs. And we'll have a lot of time in the breakout rooms to go into all the details about the concept designs, specific intersections in front of your house, how things connect, all those things. Then, so those breakout rooms will be about 20 minutes. We're trying to get to those around 6:25, it might be 6:30, but right around there. On the right side, you can see that we'll have 4 breakout rooms and we'd love you to go into the breakout room that best fits your situation. Okay, if you're a Sunnyside resident, a Chafee Park resident, a Spanish speaker, or someone who doesn't live in Sunnyside or Chafee Park but wants to give input and be part of the conversation. After the breakout rooms, we'll join back and we'll report out what we heard, and then we'll talk about next steps. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Geneva Hooten, the Dottie project manager.
Hi, thanks, Chris, and hi, everyone. My name is Geneva Houghton, and thank you so much for coming this evening. So we're here to talk about the North Zuni Bikeway project between 46th and 52nd. And this is an important connection in how we look at how people are getting around the city by bike, because it's connecting to the future West 46th Avenue bike lanes, the 50th Avenue bike lanes, and of course to the park itself. And this is providing one of those key north-south connections that gets people under I-70 and is trying to link together the neighborhoods of Sunnyside and Chaffee Park. Next slide. And this was a corridor that was identified 10 years ago. It was then in another citywide bike plan. And in the Blueprint Denver plan, this was also identified as a priority corridor. Back in September, as part of the Northwest Transportation Network, we shared that this was a corridor that we were pursuing bike lanes on. We've been working really closely with a great stakeholder group, including representatives from Chaffee Park and Sunnyside United Neighbors. Last month, we shared existing conditions on the corridor, which is our opportunity to just kind of reiterate what does this look like today with the data that we have. We've met with Chaffee Park RNO, and we're also meeting with Sunny later this week. And tonight we're here to again share with you what we have learned on the corridor and our concept designs that we're intending to move forward. And we want to hear your feedback and really have some small group conversations. We also know that part of the corridor was actually repaved last year, just up to 48th, and the rest of the corridor between 48th, so pretty much at I-70, up to 52nd is going to be repaved this summer, which gives us an opportunity to really leverage our construction and make sure that we are also building out a bike network at the same time. So the intention is to move forward with installation of a project this summer, and that's why we're here this evening. Next slide, please. So why is the city focusing on bikeways? Well, there are a lot of reasons. One being safety. It's part of the city's commitment to the Vision Zero action plan to eliminate all serious injuries and fatalities on our roadway network. We want to work on really building out a network that gets people where they want to go, of building 125 miles of bike lanes by 2023. We want to increase options for how people can get around, so that they might choose to leave their car at home for a trip or two during the day. And ultimately, we want to move more people throughout the city. Just as more people are moving to Denver, it's important that we have good ways for them to get around. And as part of that safety focus, this slide is just showing that we are trending in the wrong direction in terms of safety on our streets. And therefore, every project that we look at is an opportunity to reevaluate how we're moving people and how to mitigate speeds and really be prioritizing safety above everything. Next slide. So what have we heard? Over the past year plus, we've been working in Northwest Denver quite a lot and hearing from residents and people who work there and saying, how does it work to get around? And over the last bit of time, including a more recent survey, this is what we heard about the street. We heard about a desire for comfort. We heard a lot about speeding. We heard about crossing some of those busy intersections and some concerns about traffic volume. And overall, almost 90% of those comments are safety related. And actually the next slide gets into this a little bit more. So back last spring, we had an online input map where people could place pins and lines and say, this intersection is really tough for me to cross, or I can't see when I'm trying to turn right. And this is what we heard on the corridor. It was really focused between 50th and 52nd. We heard that cars are speeding downhill going from 52nd southbound. We heard that crossing at 51st to get to the park is quite challenging. And that ultimately that having a north-south route would be helpful for people who bike. And then overall, through the Northwest Community Transportation Network, we heard lots of things about speeding, crossing busy intersections, trade-offs with removing on-street parking, and overall a desire to make Northwest Denver better, particularly for people who are walking. Thanks. And last month we had a survey out, and hopefully some of you were able to take that survey. And in that, we asked, where are those places that are the hardest for you to cross, whether you're walking or biking or driving? And we heard a lot about 51st and Zuni. So that tracks really closely to what we heard last year. And then those intersections trying to get across 52nd, intersection of 50th, under I-70, and then some comments as well at 46. So you can see that the whole corridor has input of saying maybe there are some places where we can make some improvements. And ultimately it's that crossing to the park where we are seeing the most comments. And the concept that we're going to be sharing with you tonight and that we're going to be breaking out into rooms to talk about is intended to really address some of these challenging crossings so that we can create a more multimodal street on Zuni. And what we're talking about tonight is actually two different bike facility types. So in the very north, between 50th and 52nd, we'll be talking about a neighborhood bikeway, and we'll get into that. And then from 50th down to 46th, we're looking at a buffered bike lane. So these are two different treatments that look pretty different on the street, and we'll start diving into why those were chosen and what those are going to look like.
Super. Thanks, Geneva. Thanks for the setup. So I'll take it from here for a while and excuse me, and give some of the details. So we're going to start with the buffered bike lane section. And as Geneva alluded to, we choose or the facilities are decided upon based on traffic data, land use data, all sorts of different things. But what we've shown here on this slide are two things. On the left is what a buffered bike lane would look like between 46th and 50th. So this is if you were standing in the road and looking, say, north, and you could see how the space between face of curb to face of curb is laid out. So we have 36 feet of width to work with. And what we're showing are two 10-foot travel lanes, a buffer on each side of 2 feet, and a 6-foot bike lane. So that's how we're proposing to lay the space out now. The reason that we end up in a buffered bike lane has everything to do with this circle right here, really. So we're at 3,400 vehicles per day on that section of roadway south of I-70, really. And the speeds are quite high. They're in the 30-mile-an-hour range in each direction. Notice that the volumes do off of, and Geneva will talk a little bit about this northern piece there, but yeah, we've chosen to continue for facility continuity and for consistency, and a lot to do with the speeds. So we showed in the last slide, I showed you what the facility would look like if you're standing on the road and kind of looking north. This is what it would look like if you were up in the air above it looking down. And so on north is to the top here, and I believe this is probably 50th here, this intersection. So what this section looks like from the top, from left to right, is the red lines are the curbs, the faces of the curbs, and then we have a bike lane, the 6-foot bike lane, a 2-foot buffer, 10-foot travel lane southbound, 10-foot travel lane northbound, 2-foot buffer, 6-foot northbound bike lane, and then the curb. So that'll give you a sense of how that works. And as you can really clearly see, that takes up all the space in the roadway. And so we're going to talk about parking in just a little bit. But this configuration does require the removal of on-street parking from the 46th to 50th section. A couple other key spots tied back to some of the input Geneva was talking about. So I wanted to show you how the intersection of 48th and Zuni would work, and also how under I-70 works and how that would be reconfigured. So what we're doing at the intersection with 48th is putting conflict markings to improve visibility at the existing traffic signal, and try to make that safer and make the crossings more conspicuous. We'd also refresh the crosswalk markings east-west. Under I-70, as it's configured today, is really just one big space on each side. And we're proposing to change that to put left turn lanes in to make it a lot clearer to everyone what vehicles' intents are as they come to the intersections. They intend to turn left, they intend to go straight. That ties back to some of the feedback we heard. We're also trying to narrow up the lanes to get the vehicular speeds down. So back to parking, which I alluded to in the cross section or in the the plan view map. So on the left here, excuse me, in this chart, we did a parking study. So we did a parking occupancy study on Zuni to see how that space is being utilized. And since it's a residential area primarily, this was a morning study, usually 5 a.m. in the morning, to try to get the maximum residential demand. And we've broken out the segments from 46th to 48th, 48th to 50th, and 50th to 52nd. And so you can see how many percent of the curb space was available and how much was utilized in each section. And the highest was near 50th to 52nd. We're aware, we have heard input about the park and that the parking demands there vary. You know, they aren't necessarily like the residential. And that was one of our thinkings too, as we talk about that piece from 50th to 52nd. So the big takeaway here, tied back to the information I showed you about the design, is the parking is planned to be removed between 46th and 50th to implement the buffered bike lane section, which is required based on the speeds and volumes. So that's kind of how that chain works. This is a map. Sorry, these are several maps that show our parking counts. What the green line means, that's the block face and its occupancy, and they were all less than 65% occupied. So it just shows that on the main street, and we also looked at the side streets, that there's quite a bit of availability of parking. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hooten to talk about the neighborhood bikeway piece.
North of 50th is where we're transitioning from that buffered bike lane to a neighborhood bikeway. And I'm actually going to ask Chris to go one slide forward, and then we're going to come back to this one. So a neighborhood bikeway is a shared street. And the idea behind this is that if we can bring the speeds and the volumes of cars down low enough, and if we add enough things to kind of add some friction on the street, make it a better place for people to bike, that ultimately that can be a really safe and comfortable option that can also move people to say, maybe I'll pick up my bike for a trip today. So this is a shared street with elements, particularly at the intersections, that are aimed to slow vehicular travel. And sometimes that means slowing the turning speed, and sometimes that means also slowing down the speeds north and south on Zuni. We're also trying to add additional pedestrian crossing benefits. And we add wayfinding signage as well to kind of provide some placemaking and help people connect to the full bike network. And one of the reasons why we think that a neighborhood bikeway is a good treatment just between 50th and 52nd on the street is also because of the park. And we know that this is a community asset. We know that people come here and have rec leagues and fun food truck carts and things like that and parties. And so we want to make sure that this part of the street is kept as a place that is really easy to access, whether you are walking, biking, and for car trips that folks might be taking. So what that's going to look like on the street itself is not actually any difference to what you see today in terms of there being a parking lane. You have a shared travel lane on either direction and parking on the other side. However, I do want to note a couple of things about this corridor and some of our proposed designs. So what you'll see is that the speeding in this northern segment is actually quite high. And it's interesting as well because we have southbound speeds that are at 90 or 85th percentile at 29 miles per hour. And the northbound speeds are even higher than that, which is maybe counterintuitive considering that it's a hill. But what that's showing us is no matter if people are going uphill or downhill, they're going too fast for the comfort that we want to see. And particularly when we think about there being over 1,700 cars a day, we have an opportunity here to add some things on the street to really bring that speed down and to make it a better multimodal street. So Chris, if you can skip forward 2 slides for me. Thank you. So what we're proposing is at the crossing of 52nd Avenue, where Denver goes into unincorporated Adams County, we know that that crossing is challenging and there aren't any stop signs to stop cross traffic. So what we are proposing are curb extensions and median refuge islands, which just provide some friction on the street to slow cars down, and then also make it an easier place to cross as a pedestrian. Between 52nd and 51st, what we have is a chicane. And a chicane is a treatment that we don't yet have in Denver. And this is a traffic calming feature that will narrow the travel lane, and it forces a shift of the travel lane. So what that does is it slows people down rather than just allowing them to go straight. And that particular point will work, and we think it will work because it's going to help reduce some of those speeds when we're seeing the most speeding happening on that section of the street. Next slide, please. Similarly, at 51st Avenue, and this is where we heard quite a lot about crossing challenges, we have curb extensions and median refuge islands, which will help both with slowing traffic down and making it a more comfortable place for people to cross and to bike. And then a little bit south of that, just north of 50th, between 50th and 51st, we have a pinch point. And what this is it's a way of kind of narrowing the street in one location. So really only one car can pass it at any one time. And what this does is it effectively, if you have two cars that are coming or a car and a bike that are coming at the same time, it requires both to yield and kind of have that person-to-person conversation through the windshield, if you will, where one person is yielding to the other coming up or down the street. And that alone, we see reducing speeds. So these elements together of medians, curb extensions, chicanes, and pinch points is a way for us to really address some of those safety concerns that we're seeing on the street and overall provide a more multimodal street that doesn't have as many of the parking impacts as we might see a little bit farther south. And it would be we would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the other projects. And so I'm going to just touch on these three. And then I'm seeing a couple of questions coming in through the chat. And so we will make sure that you have some time to ask those questions and talk with your neighbors in just a few moments. So those nearby projects include the Northwest Community Transportation Network, which is a rapid build out of high comfort bikeways across Northwest Denver, including Zuni, including 46th Avenue, including Clay Street and some other corridors here very close in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, 46th Avenue is a full corridor that we've been working on from Tennyson all the way to Inca Street. And one portion of that is going to be installed very, very soon. And that's the portion from Federal to Lipan. So if you see some construction crews out in the next couple of weeks, that's the project. And you're going to see a combination of bike lanes transitioning to buffered bike lanes and then to a neighborhood bikeway for just a block. And that's one of the reasons why this Zuni Street connection is really important. We know, of course, people want to travel east-west across the city, but we also know that people want to travel north and south and make sure that they have a safe way of getting under I-70 to some of our northern Denver neighborhoods. And then very last, I'm really excited to share that the north side of the park along 52nd Avenue is going to have a sidewalk that it will be installed later this summer. This is part of a capital improvement project. We know that it's a gap in the network, and it's definitely a gap in the park's park network here for the 51st and Zuni Park. So that's another project that you'll see coming up over the next few months. So with that, we know that we've just thrown a lot of information at you, and I'm sure that you have questions. So we are going to work on breaking folks out into some Zoom rooms. Now, if you haven't done a Zoom room before, it's kind of fun, but bear with us as we also are manually dividing each person into a different room. And how we're going to break them out is by 4 different things. One is if you live in Sunnyside, if you live in Chaffee Park, if you are a Spanish speaker, so that we can have our live interpretation, and then those who live outside of Sunny or Chaffee Park. So if you all will do me a big favor, and in the chat panel at the bottom of your screen, right now I see a 7 and a little red circle on it. If you'll click on that for me and put in which room is appropriate for you, and then the cross streets that you're closest to. And the reason why we're asking for those cross streets is that we can really understand maybe someone lives directly on Zuni versus someone who lives a few blocks away. So thank you so much, and we will see you in some rooms.
Great. And then, So Julia will be helping everyone get to their room. Thanks, Geneva. Julia, if you could bring us back, I believe 6:45 will be appropriate time for us to come back from the breakout rooms. That would be great.
Okay.
See you soon.
Okay, and Pete Winterschnight, what room would you like to join? I saw you said 38th and Wapan. We also have Chad
Oh,
Snowborn.
sorry, it's on mute.
That's
I'll go
okay.
to the Sunnyside room. I'm technically just across the intersection, but close enough, I feel like.
Sorry, which room would you like to join?
The Sunnyside?
Sunnyside, okay. And then Chad Shelburne, what room would you like to join? We also have Leslie Gearing and Michael Harmer. I'm not sure which rooms you guys would like to join.
This is Mike Harmer. I'm actually city staff, so
Hi, Michael.
I'm willing to join any of them.
Okay. Okay, I will send you to a room then. And Chad, Shelburne, what room would you like to join? Chad, if you're there, I think you are muted.
Okay. I have rejoined the main session. I'm waiting. Let me
Good
pull
job,
up.
Chris.
Yay. So give me 1 second. I'll pull up the, I'll share screen here and we can kind of take it the next step here. I know that that probably seemed too short for everyone. Everybody had a lot to say and talk about. So I am definitely going to show you, we're going to report out and I'm going to show you how you can give us further input if you weren't able to kind of to say everything you wanted to say. I know some folks spend a lot of time really looking at the designs and want to give us detail. But first I was hoping that Viria Sosa could again remind folks how to join the Spanish language channel in about 30 seconds. Viria, are you back with us? Give her 1 second.
So Chris, we didn't have any Spanish speakers join us, so I
Okay.
think that we can skip that.
Great. Okay. And I will go to the next slide then. Okay, so let's so in my room we had a great discussion. Let's go through the different rooms and just talk about what the general themes are, maybe some specifics. We have a little bit of time for this, so feel free to kind of, you know, really try to tell us what folks were saying in your room and so we can all hear it. So I'd love to hear from the Sunnyside room first.
Hey, this is Ryan Mulligan. You know, we had some comments about kind of where the corridor will point folks to and really what the connections are on either end, either 46th or up at 52nd. 52nd being a bit of a wild card given there's not too much infrastructure there on the Adams County side to receive a lot of bikers. Talked about some of the advantages to the multiple crossing opportunities and the safety reinforcements that have come with that. And then some a discussion about the pinch points as well, and you know, some of the position that it might put bikers in if they're either opposing a vehicle coming up on that pinch point at the same time, or say traveling through it with a driver behind them as well. So reinforcing that it's meant to slow down traffic and create that opportunity for the different modes to, you know, acknowledge each other, maybe slow down a little bit and really reinforce that shared street aspect. So Karen, did I miss any of the main themes that came up in our room?
I think you got the big pieces, questions about those wayfinding elements and what we're going to be, how we're going to be guiding people, interactions with Adams County. And where Emily was kind enough to share an image of 30th Street between Champa and Stout of what pinch point with the paint and post looks like. So we dove into some of those operations a little bit more. So I think that hits the highlights. Thanks.
Super. Okay, let's hear from probably Michael Kozlow was running the Chafee Park, and I hope there was someone named Colleen that I hope got to join your meeting. She was in ours, and we tried to get her over there. So, go ahead, Michael.
Hey, Chris, everybody. So from the Chafee Park side, we had a really good discussion that had to do with, I guess we started talking about the sidewalks at 52nd going in. There was a question about how our pinch points and chicanes would be installed, and that we would be paint posts. It would be the initial format, so the flex posts. We tend to look at that first before we would invest in the concrete infrastructure for permanent. Also, there's a question about why not a traffic circle at 51st instead of the median refuge and the bulb outs. And that had to do with the pedestrian crossing volumes being an issue we've heard quite a bit about there. And so we wanted to use the median refuge islands and the bulb outs instead to make it easier to cross Zuni at 51st instead of the traffic circle. There was a question about using planters as separation elements. And I think it's one thing to point out, Dottie does not have landscaping staff, but we do have one location in Denver on Larimer Street where we've partnered with UCD, and they are maintaining the planters between 14th and 15th Street. So it's not an impossible thing. We would just need to have a maintenance partner to be able to maintain those landscaping elements. And then would let's see. How could we connect to the Cherry Creek Trail? We talked a little bit about how the project, eventually we're going to have this network. So 46th Avenue, Clay Dunkeld will be an option to 29th, ultimately going from Chafee Park over to the Inca path, the Inca Street path, and then that into Conevaca Park, which goes to the Cherry Creek Trail. And then just a lot of discussion about we would like to see some wider sidewalks too in Chafee Park area. And that is noted. It's not a part of the bike lane project, but we are, as we're installing these new sidewalks like on 52nd, they will be wider sidewalks than what you're seeing now, the Hollywood curve. So that was Chafee Park.
Great, thank you, Michael. So I understood we didn't have any Spanish speakers, so we don't have a report out from there. I was running room 4, and we had some very detailed comments that I wanted to share with the group that were kind of the tone was, you know, we need more than shown here, not less. And some specifics were about, you know, we have some bus stops shown in the corridor and they're just dashed lines, and how do people know that's not a turn lane and they're not supposed to be in there? And could we put, you know, the word bus in there, something like that, to make it clear about what that is? Really a lot of comments about markings, and we want more markings. So we don't have that many. There's a lot where we could use maybe more marked crosswalks that aren't shown there today, more conflict markings. There was a real concern that at the lower volume streets that we are sort of just abandoning the bicyclist on their own to you know, to just navigate the intersection with no guidance. So that was something. Concern about folks parking in the buffered bike lane because there's no vertical element, and you know, how do we keep them from doing that? Even to the point where there was a comment that some people have said in meetings, please don't put vertical elements in so I can park there. And so we know that's an issue coming up. And I explained we've been talking to right-of-way enforcement about, you know, how enforcement would work in these type of corridors and what the tempo would be. So that was a big thing. And then we had some specific things in the northern area. That pinch point, we had a little discussion about, we kind of ran out of time, but the gist of it was that, you know, the car is a much bigger vehicle than the bike. And is the car going to yield to the bike in that space? There's a disparity sort of in sort of power, right? In sort of mass. And so there was concern about that. And there was a suggestion that maybe if we made a little more space in the pinch point sort of bulb out, that a bike could choose to bypass the pinch point and sort of avoid that head-on configuration. And so that was something I said we consider. The pinch point's really about trying to reduce vehicle speeds, right? So I think that through. And then the other thing was at the park. So talking about, you know, at the park, we feel like we need more, not less. And is neighborhood bikeway really what we need there? Wouldn't the bike lanes be better? And we tried to have a little discussion about, you know, pedestrian crossings versus the bikes, and we kind of got cut off. So I know there's a lot more to talk about there, and I promised my group that I would share with them how they can give us more input at the end of this. So that's my report out. Okay, so everybody could kind of hear what everybody was thinking. Our next steps. This is the piece I was talking about, where, you know, if you didn't feel like you were able to really give us all your input, we can still grab information from you. We'd love to hear from you. So at our project website, which is you can sign up for office hours. These are like 1 to 3 people at a time speaking with a Dottie staff person about your specific situation. You can sign up for those at bit.ly/Denver Bike Paving. And I will say the capitalization does matter. So capital D, Denver, capital B Bike, capital P Paving. I think we've caught other variations of that, but this will definitely take you to our website. Or you can send us an email, bikes@denvergov.org. And if you include the North Zuni bike lane in the subject, we'll know how to get back to you and we can set up a call. There were some questions that's on the chat about when is this going to happen. So right now, this is really on a fast track implementation schedule. And so we're trying to get as much input as we can to get the best design we can and start building out our bike network. So tentative summer 2021 is what we're thinking, and the construction flyers will be mailed to adjacent properties so that you're aware. Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to say one more thing. Also, if you leave your email in the chat, we can grab it and add you to our project list. So feel free to do that. We're recording the chat as well, and we'll grab all your questions and input from there too. So that really wraps it up for tonight. I really wanted to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to be a part of this. And it's an important project. We've been hearing about it for a year from Chafee Park and Sunnyside about how they want these better connections to make things work. And maybe I'll let Geneva kind of send us out. So Geneva.
Thanks all for your input. And I think that this is a really great compromise and way for us to focus on making our streets safer and more multimodal for everyone. So thank you for coming this evening. And as Chris had shared, we have other ways for you to continue the conversation. If you have any questions, of course, just email our team and we'll get back to you. So thanks and have a great evening.